The envelope trembled in my hands, its crisp white surface marred by a single coffee stain. 12 years of silence reduced to a few hastily scrawled words. My mother's handwriting hadn't changed. I stood in the middle of my graduation party, surrounded by the hollow laughter and champagne-fueled conversations of my father's business associates. The letter burned against my palm like a dirty secret. "Mary, darling, come join us." Diana's voice cut through the ambient noise, dripping with artificial sweetness. My stepmother waved from across our mansion's great room, her perfect smile never quite reaching her eyes. I slipped the envelope into my purse. "Just freshening up," I called back, already heading for the stairs. "Don't be long," my father Robert commanded, his tone brooking no argument. "The Hendersons want to discuss your college plans." My heels clicked against the marble steps as I climbed to my bedroom. The sounds of the party faded, replaced by the thundering of my heart. I locked the door, sank onto my bed, and pulled out the envelope. "My dearest Mary," it began, "there are things you need to know, things I should have told you years ago. Your father isn't who you think he is. Neither is Diana. Meet me tomorrow at noon, Riverside Cafe. Come alone. Love, Mom." "Bullshit," I whispered, crumpling the paper. "She abandons me at 8 years old, leaves Lily when she was just 4, and now she wants to play concerned mother?" A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Mary?" It was Lily, her voice muffled through the door. "Dad's getting annoyed. Diana's telling everyone you're having a teenage moment." I smoothed my graduation dress and opened the door. My 15-year-old sister stood there, worry creasing her forehead. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine." I forced a smile. Just needed a minute away from Diana's social circus. "She means well," Lily said, but her eyes darted away. Even she didn't believe that anymore. We descended together, arm in arm. Diana immediately swooped in, steering me toward a cluster of important guests. "There's our graduate. I was just telling the Hendersons about your plans for business school. Following in your father's footsteps, aren't we?" I caught my father watching us, his expression unreadable. He raised his crystal tumbler slightly. "A warning, not a toast. Play your part," that gesture said. "Keep the facade intact." "Actually," I heard myself say, "I'm considering taking a gap year." The conversation stuttered to a halt. Diana's fingers dug into my arm. "Oh, darling, you never mentioned that before." "It's a recent decision." I met my father's hardening gaze. "I think I need some time to figure things out." "Nonsense," Robert cut in, joining our circle. "Mary's just overwhelmed by all the excitement. Business school applications are already submitted." "But perhaps we should discuss this later," Diana interrupted smoothly, her smile never wavering. "This is a celebration after all." I watched them spin their web of lies and expectations, just as they'd done since my mother left. Since Diana arrived 2 years later with her designer wardrobe and calculated affection. The letter in my purse felt heavier with each passing moment. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Lily was asleep, I stood in my bathroom staring at my reflection. My mother's words echoed in my head. "Your father isn't who you think he is." I pulled out my phone and typed a message to my best friend Amanda. "Need to talk. Something big happening? Meet me before noon tomorrow?" Her reply came instantly. "Always. What's wrong?" I thought about all the questions I'd buried over the years. About the night my mother vanished. About the way Diana seemed to know exactly how to manipulate my father. About the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. "Time to dig up some family secrets," I texted back. "I think I'm done playing happy families." My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "Be careful who you trust, Mary. Some secrets are buried for a reason." I deleted the message with trembling fingers, but the warning had already taken root. Tomorrow, I'd meet my mother and finally learn the truth, or walk into a trap 12 years in the making. The Riverside Cafe buzzed with the usual lunch crowd, but Amanda's grip on my arm kept me from bolting. My mother's letter lay between us on the table, coffee rings staining its edges. "She's late," Amanda said, checking her phone. 20 minutes late. I traced the rim of my untouched coffee. Maybe she's not coming. Maybe this is just another. "Mary," Diana's voice sliced through the cafe chatter. She stood at our table, designer handbag clutched like a shield. What a surprise! My stomach dropped. Behind her, I spotted Ethan, her business partner, securing a table with a clear view of us. His presence wasn't a coincidence. "I was just having coffee with Amanda," I said, sliding the letter under my napkin. Diana's perfectly manicured nails drummed against the table. "Funny, I could have sworn you told your father you were meeting your academic advisor." She slid into the empty chair. "He'll be so disappointed." "Are you following me?" "Protecting you." Her smile didn't waver. "From what I understand, Jessica tends to hurt the people closest to her. Ask your grandmother Helen about that sometime." The mention of Grandma Helen sent a chill through me. "What do you know about my grandmother?" "More than you'd think." Diana leaned forward. "Your father and I want what's best for you, Mary. That's why we've already handled the business school arrangements. Full ride scholarship, housing, everything." Amanda shifted uncomfortably. "Mary hasn't decided?" "Oh, but she has." Diana's tone hardened. "Haven't you, Mary? After all, your father's reputation in the business world opens so many doors. It would be shame to close them." My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Back entrance. Now. "Excuse me." I stood abruptly. "Bathroom." Diana's eyes narrowed. "Ethan, would you make sure Mary finds her way? These old buildings can be confusing." I was already moving, weaving through tables. The back hallway led past the bathrooms to a service entrance. A figure waited in the shadows. Not my mother, but Grandma Helen. "Quickly," she whispered, ushering me through the door into an alley. "Your mother couldn't come. They're watching her too." "Who's watching? What's happening?" "Listen carefully." Helen gripped my shoulders. "Diana isn't who she pretends to be. Before she married your father, she worked for—" A door slammed. Ethan's voice carried from inside. "Miss Collins?" Grandma Helen pressed something into my hand, a key with a tag attached. "Storage Unit 247, Central Lock. Go tonight. And Mary?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Trust no one, not even me." She disappeared around the corner as Ethan emerged. "Everything all right?" "Fine." I pocketed the key. "Just needed some air." Back inside, Diana was showing Amanda photos on her phone. "And here's Mary at her first ballet recital. I've saved everything, of course. I consider her my own daughter." Amanda caught my eye, her expression warning me to stay calm. "How thoughtful," I said, reclaiming my seat. "Especially since you didn't know me then." Diana's smile flickered. "Family history is so important, don't you think? Speaking of which, your father mentioned the trust fund paperwork needs signing before business school. The trust fund isn't accessible until I'm 25. Unless you're enrolled in an approved program." Diana stood, gathering her things. "We'll discuss it at dinner. 7 sharp. Don't be late. We're celebrating your future." After she left, Amanda grabbed my hand. "What happened outside?" "I need a favor." I showed her the key. "Tonight, no questions." "Your father will know if you leave." "No, he won't." I pulled out my phone, typing quickly. "Because I'll be at dinner, being the perfect daughter. You're going to storage unit 247. Amanda's eyes widened. "Mary, what are you getting into?" I thought about Grandma Helen's fear, Diana's threats, and my mother's warning. The truth, whatever it costs. My phone buzzed again. "Diana, wear the blue dress tonight, the one I bought you. Family photos for the business school announcement." I showed Amanda the message. "See, they're already writing my future. Time to rewrite theirs instead." "Be careful," Amanda whispered. Diana's not just protective, she's scared. Scared people are dangerous. I watched Ethan paying his bill, his eyes constantly scanning the cafe. Good, they should be scared, because whatever they're hiding in that storage unit, it's just the beginning. The key felt heavy in my pocket, like the weight of secrets yet to be uncovered. Tonight, the facade would start to crack. I just hoped I was ready for what lay beneath. Amanda's text arrived at 3 in the morning. Storage unit empty except one thing coming over. I met her in the garden, away from the security cameras. She handed me a leather-bound journal, its pages yellow with age. It was wrapped in plastic, hidden inside a wall panel. My hands shook as I opened it. My mother's handwriting filled the pages, but these weren't just diary entries. They were records, dates, account numbers, transactions, names I recognized from my father's business circle. "There's more," Amanda whispered. "Someone else was there. They left before I arrived, but the lock was already broken." A light flickered on in my father's study. I shoved the journal into my jacket. "Go home. I'll call you tomorrow." Inside, I found Robert at his desk, Diana perched on the edge like a sentinel. They both looked up when I entered, their faces masks of concern. "Late night walk?" Diana asked, too sweetly. "Couldn't sleep." I moved to leave, but Robert's voice stopped me. "Sit down, Mary." He pushed a folder across his desk. "Diana found something interesting in your college applications." My heart pounded. The journal pressed against my ribs like an accusation. "You applied to journalism programs." He spat the words like poison. "Behind our backs." "I applied to several programs," I said carefully, keeping my options open. Diana circled behind me. "We're worried about you, darling. These rebellious choices, secret meetings." She placed her hands on my shoulders. "Your father thinks it might be best if you spent some time at the lake house. Clear your head." "You mean isolate me?" I shrugged off her touch. "Like you isolated Mom?" The room went deadly quiet. Robert's knuckles whitened around his whiskey glass. "What exactly are you implying?" "I found her journal." The words escaped before I could stop them. "I know about the offshore accounts, the shell companies. What did you do to her?" Diana's laugh was brittle. "Jessica was unstable, dear. Her accusations were true." Ethan's voice made us all turn. He stood in the doorway, looking haunted. "I can't do this anymore, Diana. Tell her the truth." "Ethan," Diana warned, but he cut her off. "Your mother discovered irregularities in the company books," he said. "Money laundering, fraud. When she threatened to expose it." Robert's glass shattered against the wall. "Get out." "She didn't abandon us," I realized, bile rising in my throat. "You forced her out." "We protected you," Diana snapped. "Your precious mother would have destroyed everything. The company, our reputation, your future." I backed toward the door, clutching the journal. "Does Lily know? Does she know what kind of people are raising her?" "Mary," Robert's voice was deadly calm. "If you walk out that door with that journal, you'll regret it. Think about your sister." The threat hung in the air like smoke. I thought about Lily, sleeping upstairs, innocent and unaware, about Grandma Helen's warning, about my mother, somewhere out there, waiting. "You can't control me anymore." I turned to Ethan. "Tell the truth. Tell everyone." "He won't," Diana smiled. "Because Ethan knows what happens to people who betray family secrets. Don't you, darling?" Ethan's face drained of color. He looked at me, then away. "I'm sorry, Mary. I can't." I ran through the house, past Lily's room where a light now glowed, down the stairs. My phone buzzed with texts. Amanda warning me that someone was following her home. Another unknown number. "Meet me where it started. Bring the journal." Behind me, I heard Robert on the phone, Diana's heels clicking on marble, Ethan's uncertain footsteps. The weight of 12 years of lies pressed down like a stone. In my car, hands shaking on the wheel, I made a choice. The journal held answers, but it also held danger. I took photos of every page, sent them to secure emails, then drove toward the place where everything began, the house where we lived before my mother vanished. My phone rang. Lily's voice was small, frightened. "Mary, Dad's calling people. Diana's saying you're having a breakdown. What's happening?" "Listen carefully," I told her. "Pack a bag. When Grandma Helen comes for you, go with her. Don't trust anyone else." "Are you coming back?" I thought about the journal, about Ethan's fear, about Diana's threats. Yes, but first, I'm going to make them pay for what they did to Mom, to all of us. The sun was rising as I drove, painting the sky the color of old bruises. Behind me, the life I knew crumbled. Ahead lay truth, revenge, and maybe, finally, justice. The old house loomed before me, its windows dark except for one, my mother's old studio. Someone was waiting. I clutched the journal closer, checking my rearview mirror for the third time. No tail, but that meant nothing in this game anymore. My phone buzzed with another message from Amanda. "Police at my house. Diana filed harassment charges." The front door creaked open before I could knock. Grandma Helen stood there, looking older than I'd ever seen her. "You shouldn't have come. You knew." The words tasted bitter. "All these years, you knew what they did to Mom." She led me inside, past dust-covered furniture and faded photographs. "Your mother made me promise to protect you girls. Sometimes protection means silence. It means complicity." I pulled out the journal. "These records, the offshore accounts, are exactly what got your mother erased from our lives." Helen's hands trembled as she lit a cigarette. "Diana wasn't the first, you know. There were others before her, women who helped Robert hide his dealings. Your mother was different. She kept evidence." A floorboard creaked upstairs. Helen's eyes widened. "You were followed." "Mary." Ethan emerged from the shadows, hands raised. "Just listen." I backed toward the door, but Helen stepped between us. "He's been helping me, feeding information about Diana's plans." "Why should I trust either of you?" "Because," Ethan pulled out his phone, "I recorded everything. The night Diana orchestrated your mother's departure, the threats, Robert's connections to people who make problems disappear. The implications hit like ice water. They didn't just force her out, they—" "No," Helen cut in. "Jessica escaped, but others weren't so lucky. Show her, Ethan." He handed me his phone. Photos filled the screen. Documents, surveillance images, bank statements, names I recognized from my father's inner circle, people who'd vanished over the years. "Diana's getting sloppy," Ethan said. "Desperate. She knows you have the journal, but she doesn't know about these." My phone lit up with Lily's number. When I answered, Diana's voice purred through the speaker. "Having fun playing detective, dear. Lily's quite worried about you. We all are." "Where's my sister?" "Safe, for now. But accidents happen, don't they? Just ask your mother." The line went dead. Helen grabbed my arm as my knees buckled. "We need to move. They'll trace the call." "I can't leave Lily." "You can't help her if you're dead." Ethan checked the windows. "Diana has people watching the house. Your father's lawyers are already moving to declare you unstable, unfit. Once they get control—" "They won't." I straightened, mind racing. "The company's annual gala is next week. Every investor, every partner will be there." "Mary, no." Helen's face went ash white. "A public confrontation is exactly what they want. Proof of your instability. Not a confrontation." I opened the journal to a specific page. "An execution. Diana's not the only one with recordings." Ethan's phone buzzed. His face hardened as he read the message. "We have another problem. The police aren't just at Amanda's. They're calling it a suicide attempt." The world tilted. Amanda would never. They're framing her, like they framed Mom. "There's more." Helen pulled out an envelope. "Your mother left this, said to give it to you when you were ready. Inside is proof that Diana was involved in similar schemes before she met Robert. other families, other disappearances. Headlights swept across the windows, car doors slammed outside. Back door, Ethan hissed. I'll stall them. Helen pressed the envelope into my hands. Remember, revenge isn't about destruction, it's about justice. Your mother understood that too late. I slipped into the night as voices filled the house. My phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. Time to choose, Mary, your sister's future or your mother's past. The journal weighed heavy in my bag, but the envelope felt heavier. Somewhere in the city, Amanda lay in a hospital bed, framed for her own attempted murder. Lily sat trapped in that mansion, surrounded by monsters wearing family masks. And my mother's ghost whispered of choices made and prices paid. I started the car, mind made up. Diana wanted to play with lives? Fine, but she'd forgotten something crucial. I was Robert Collins's daughter, too, and he'd taught me well how to destroy someone completely. The gala was 7 days away. Time to show them what revenge really looked like. The hospital corridor stretched endless and white. Through the observation window, Amanda lay still, tubes snaking from her arms. The doctor's words echoed in my head. Suspicious levels of sedatives in her system. My phone buzzed. Diana's number. I declined the call, but her text appeared instantly. Tragic about Amanda. Stress can be so devastating for young people. Lily's quite distraught. The threat wasn't subtle anymore. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass, watching Amanda's chest rise and fall. The nurse's whispers carried down the hall. Second attempt this month from that family. You shouldn't be here. Ethan's voice made me turn. He looked haggard, tie loose around his neck. Diana's people are watching the hospital. Let them watch. I pulled out my phone, showing him the email I'd drafted. Every board member, every investor, one click sends them proof of Diana's past, the other families, the disappearances. You'll destroy your father's company. He destroyed my family first. Ethan grabbed my wrist, voice low. Think about what you're doing. Robert's empire isn't just buildings and bank accounts. There are people who depend on him staying in power. Dangerous people. A nurse approached, clipboard in hand. Miss Collins, your sister's here. Lily stood at the end of the hall, Diana's hand firmly on her shoulder. My sister's face was blank, carefully composed, a look I recognized from years of family photos. Mary, darling. Diana's smile was razor sharp. We've been so worried. First, Amanda, now these concerning emails you're drafting. How did you? Your father monitors all family communications. For safety, of course. She squeezed Lily's shoulder. We're here to take you home. The lake house is lovely this time of year. I'm not going anywhere. No. Diana's phone appeared. Interesting call today from Amanda's doctor. Apparently, someone accessed her room last night, adjusted her medication. The security cameras caught everything. My blood froze. You wouldn't. The footage is quite clear. In your current unstable state, she shrugged delicately. Well, attempted murder charges are serious. Lily's eyes met mine, a silent warning. Her hand moved slightly, tapping her pocket. A message. 10 minutes, Diana said. Say goodbye to your friend, then we're leaving, unless you prefer I send this footage to the police. They retreated down the hall, Diana's heels clicking like a countdown. Ethan touched my arm. Mary! Check my sister's pocket, I whispered. Whatever she's trying to tell me, get it. He nodded, moving casually after them. I entered Amanda's room, my hands shaking as I took hers. I'm sorry, I whispered. I didn't know they'd come after you. My phone vibrated. Ethan. Got it. USB drive. Contains recordings of Diana's conversations with someone named Marcus. Meeting you at the cafe across street. I squeezed Amanda's hand one last time. I'm going to fix this. All of it. Outside, Diana waited with a triumphant smile. Ready to be reasonable? One condition. I met her gaze steadily. Lily stays in the city with Grandma Helen. You're hardly in a position to negotiate. No? I pulled out my phone. Funny thing about email drafts, they can be scheduled, even if you take my phone, even if you lock me away. Tick-tock. Diana's smile faltered. Lily's eyes widened slightly. She knew I was bluffing, but Diana didn't. Fine. Diana's voice could freeze hell. But one wrong move, one hint of these allegations reaching the board, and Amanda's tragic accident becomes permanent. Understood? I nodded, following her to the waiting car. As we pulled away, I caught a glimpse of Ethan through the cafe window, hunched over his laptop. Whatever was on that USB drive, it was my last chance to save everyone, or lose them all. My phone lit up one final time, an unknown number. The game's bigger than you know, Mary. Some monsters wear family masks, but the real demons wear business suits. Choose your next move carefully. I deleted the message, watching the hospital disappear behind us. Diana had won this round, but she'd forgotten something crucial. I'd learned manipulation from the best. And the lake house had secrets of its own, secrets my mother had buried there 12 years ago. The war for truth was just beginning. The lake house's security cameras blinked red in the darkness. 3 days of captivity, watching Diana orchestrate my downfall through carefully leaked rumors about my mental state. The gala was tomorrow, and I was trapped here, powerless. My phone lit up with Ethan's message. USB files decoded. It's worse than we thought. Diana's working with someone inside the FBI. The lake rippled black beyond my window. Somewhere out there, Amanda lay in her hospital bed. Lily lived under Diana's thumb, and my mother, where was she now? A knock at my door. Mary? Diana's voice dripped honey. The stylist is here with your gala dress. I opened the door to find not just Diana, but Robert too. His face was granite. The board called an emergency meeting. Unfortunate timing, Diana sighed. Just when rumors about your instability are circulating, if only someone could represent your interests. The trap snapped shut. I saw it in Robert's eyes. They'd planned this perfectly. Sign these. He placed papers on the desk. Transfer of your trust fund voting rights. Temporary, of course, until you're better. And if I refuse? Diana's smile widened. Then Amanda's doctor might discover some concerning patterns in her medication logs. And Lily, well, boarding school might be best for her safety. My fingers trembled on the pen. Everything I'd discovered, every piece of evidence I'd gathered, worthless if I couldn't attend the gala, couldn't expose them. One more thing. Robert pulled out his phone. Call Helen. Tell her you've changed your mind about the evidence she's holding. What did you do to her? Nothing yet. Diana examined her manicure. Though her neighborhood has become quite dangerous lately. So many accidents, I signed. Each stroke of the pen felt like a betrayal of my mother's memory. Perfect. Diana gathered the papers. The car leaves for the gala at 7. Do wear the blue dress. It matches the bruises from your latest episode so beautifully. After they left, I stared at my reflection in the window. Behind me, the security camera watched, recording my defeat. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Check the dress. I unzipped the garment bag. Inside the hem, something hard, a small key. Another message. Lake House basement, where secrets go to drown. The basement had been sealed since we were children. My mother's art studio, Robert had claimed. But why would Diana give me? Another buzz. Ethan. Diana's contact is Marcus Reynolds, FBI. He buried evidence about 3 other families before yours. He's attending the gala. The pieces clicked. Diana wasn't just threatening me. She was daring me. Wanted me to find whatever lay in the basement. Wanted witnesses at the gala for my final breakdown. My phone lit up one last time. A photo from Lily. Amanda's hospital room, empty except for scattered medical equipment. Below it, 2 words. Help her. I clutched the key until it bit into my palm. The lake house basement held answers, but Diana knew that, was counting on it. Whatever I found down there would either save everyone I loved or destroy me completely. The security camera's red eye blinked, watching as I moved toward the basement door. Diana's voice echoed in my head. Some secrets should stay buried, dear. Just ask your mother. My mother, who had worked in this basement, who had disappeared after discovering company secrets, who had maybe never left at all. The key slid into the lock. Beyond the door, stairs descended into darkness. Above, the camera recorded everything exactly as Diana intended. I took the first step down. If Diana wanted to stage my breakdown, fine, but she'd forgotten something crucial about cornered animals. They're at their most dangerous when they have nothing left to lose. The basement door closed behind me with a final click. Whatever waited in the darkness below would either be my salvation or my undoing. Either way, Diana would have her show at the gala tomorrow night, just not the one she was expecting. The gala sparkled with false promises and champagne. I moved through the crowd in my mother's blue dress, the USB drive heavy in my clutch. Diana's carefully orchestrated stage was set. Security cameras, witnesses, even a local reporter she'd invited to document my breakdown. Ethan intercepted me near the bar. Marcus Reynolds is here, front table. I spotted the FBI agent, laughing at something Diana had whispered. She'd positioned him perfectly, close to the stage where I'd soon self-destruct, according to her plan. Amanda? I murmured. Safe. Helen has her. Ethan's hand trembled on his glass. Mary, what I helped Diana do? Save it? I checked my phone. Lily's message confirmed she was in position. Just make sure the projector works. Diana floated over, Robert trailing in her wake. Darling, you came. Though that dress, her smile flickered. Isn't it a bit dated? It was my mother's. I touched the fabric. From the night she disappeared. Robert's glass stopped halfway to his lips. Diana's eyes darted to the basement key still hanging from my neck. Found what you left for me down there, I said quietly. The real records, Mom's final artwork. Mary, Robert's voice held a warning. Whatever you're planning, ladies and gentlemen, Diana cut him off, turning to the crowd. If I could have your attention, my stepdaughter has prepared a special presentation. Exactly as I'd known she would. She wanted witnesses for what came next. I took the stage, feeling the weight of every eye. The projector hummed to life behind me. This is a story about family, I began, about secrets. The first image appeared, Diana's signature on Shell Company documents, dated years before she met my father. Then Marcus Reynolds' name on buried investigation reports. The crowd murmured. Mary, Diana's voice carried a tremor. Think carefully about what you're doing. I am. I clicked to the next slide. Surveillance photos from the lake house basement. Did you know my mother was an artist? Her last installation is still down there, preserved. Every document, every photo, every piece of evidence she gathered about your operations, about the other families you destroyed. Marcus Reynolds stood, but Ethan blocked his path. Around the room, phones recorded everything. She's clearly unwell, Diana announced smoothly. Robert, perhaps? Play the video, I said to Ethan. The screen flickered. Diana's voice filled the room. The girl's becoming a problem, Marcus. Like her mother. Handle it the same way. Reynolds' response? No loose ends this time. The lake house basement won't work again. The room erupted. Robert staggered back, staring at Diana with dawning horror. She lunged for the stage, but I was already pulling out my mother's final piece of evidence, a sealed letter addressed to the FBI's Internal Affairs Division. It's over, Diana. My voice carried across the chaos. Mom knew you'd come after her children eventually. She left breadcrumbs, knowing I'd follow them, knowing I'd finish what she started. You stupid girl! Diana's mask cracked completely. You have no idea what you've done. Your mother thought she could expose us too, and look what happened to her. Diana, Robert's voice shook. What did you do to Jessica? What you paid me to do, she whirled on him. Every time your empire was threatened, I cleaned up your messes. Your wife, your rivals, their families, all buried under paperwork and accidents. You didn't want to know the details, remember? The room had gone deathly quiet. Phones still recorded. In the doorway, I spotted Helen with Amanda and Lily. Safe. Free. Arrest them, I said to the real FBI agents emerging from the crowd, the ones Ethan had contacted, not Reynolds' corrupt team. All of them. As they led Diana away, she caught my arm. You're just like her, you know, so righteous, so sure of yourself. But revenge has a price, Mary. Ask yourself, was it worth it? I watched them take my father, too, his empire crumbling in real time as the videos spread online. The truth about Diana, about Reynolds, about all of it, exposed at last. Yes, I said softly, touching my mother's dress. Some prices are worth paying. The blue fabric shimmed under the lights, like water in the lake house basement, like secrets finally rising to the surface, refusing to stay drowned. The lake house stood empty, its windows dark against the setting sun. I traced my fingers along the basement wall where my mother's evidence had waited all these years, patient as revenge itself. The prosecutors want another statement. Amanda sat on the stairs behind me, recovered enough to leave the hospital, but still pale. About Diana's involvement in the attempts on your life. Let Ethan handle it. I picked up a dusty photograph, my mother in this same basement, smiling at the camera. He has enough evidence to bury them all. My phone buzzed with news alerts. Collins' empire crumbles. FBI corruption exposed. Diana Foster faces multiple charges. The headlines blurred together, victory tasting more bitter than sweet. Lily settled in at Helen's, Amanda said softly. She's talking about art school. A laugh escaped me. Mom would have loved that. Mary, Helen's voice echoed from upstairs. There's something you need to see. I found her in my mother's old studio, holding a sealed envelope. This arrived today, postmarked 3 days ago. The handwriting on the front matched the letter that had started everything. My hands shook as I opened it. My dearest Mary, by now you've finished what I couldn't. Diana's web is unraveled, Robert's empire exposed. But revenge wasn't my endgame. It was your liberation. Every clue I left was a step toward freedom, not just justice. There's one last truth you deserve. I'm alive, living under a new name, watching from a distance as you grew into someone stronger than I ever was. I couldn't risk contact until Diana's network was destroyed. Now, perhaps, the choice is yours. If you want to find me, start with the painting over your bed, the one of the lighthouse. You always were good at solving puzzles. All my love, Mom. The studio spun around me. Helen touched my shoulder. What will you do? Through the window, I watched the lake ripple with evening light. Somewhere out there, my mother was waiting. But her final gift wasn't the chance to find her. It was the choice of whether to try. I'm selling this place, I said. The whole estate. The money goes to Diana's other victims. And Robert? Amanda asked. Let him keep his guilt. It's a better prison than any cell. I folded the letter, tucking it away. The lighthouse painting could wait. First, I needed to learn who I was without the weight of revenge driving every choice. Helen? I turned to my grandmother. Thank you for keeping her secrets until I was ready. She nodded, understanding what I couldn't say, that sometimes love means waiting for someone to find their own path through the darkness. My phone buzzed one last time, an unknown number. The lighthouse still stands when you're ready. Some mysteries are worth taking time to solve. I deleted the message without replying. The sun sank behind the trees, painting the lake blood red. In my pocket, the basement key felt lighter now. its burden lifted. Amanda and Helen left me alone in the studio, sensing I needed this moment. I opened my mother's old sketchbook, finding a final message written in the margins. Revenge is a beginning, not an end. Choose your next chapter wisely. Standing there, surrounded by the ghost of 2 generations of Collins women, I finally understood. My mother hadn't just left me a trail of breadcrumbs to the truth. She'd left me a choice between pursuing every answer and learning to live with some questions unanswered. I locked the studio door, leaving the lighthouse painting hanging in its place. Some mysteries weren't meant to be solved immediately. Some truths needed time to ripen, like revenge served cold or forgiveness offered carefully. The lake house would keep its remaining secrets, at least for now. I had my own path to forge, beyond the shadows of family legacy and vengeance fulfilled. Behind me, the setting sun painted the windows gold, then deep purple, then black, like pages turning, ending one story, but hinting at others yet to begin.
When I was little, my mom used to tell me stories about my grandpa, how he started with nothing and built a business that could have set us up for life. But we never saw a dime of it. I didn't really get why until I was older and could understand the mess about his will and all. "Eliza, your grandpa was a tough nut," my mom said one chilly evening. We were sitting at our small kitchen table, nursing cups of lukewarm tea. The heater was busted again, and the landlord wasn't too quick to fix anything. He believed only in money earned, not given. "Why did he cut us off then? Didn't he think you'd manage his money right?" I asked, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. Mom sighed, her eyes tracing the steam rising from her cup. "It wasn't about me managing it. He had this crazy idea. Made a will that only gave his fortune to someone who made it big on their own, $500,000 at least in their business. That's just cruel," I muttered. The idea seemed ludicrous, a game set by a man who loved his money more than his family. "It was his way or the highway," Mom continued. "When I argued with him, he practically disowned me. Said if I was any good, I'd earn my way without his help. The unfairness of it all gnawed at me. Here we were, scrimping and saving every dime, while someone out there was living it up on what should have been ours. Ever since I was a kid, I had a knack for spotting a chance to make a buck. I'd set up a lemonade stand at the local golf course on sweltering summer days. 50 cents a cup. I'd holler, waving to the thirsty golfers. They couldn't resist the pitch from a freckle-faced kid with a pitcher. "You sure know how to hustle, kiddo," an old golfer named Hank once told me, chuckling as he handed over his change. "Keep that up, and you'll be a tycoon one day." I grinned, pocketing the coins. "Just saving up for something big," I'd say, my mind always on the next big thing. And it wasn't just lemonade. I made homemade baubles and bracelets, stringing them together from beads I'd find at the dollar store. I sold them wherever I could, neighborhood block parties, school events, even at the front yard during garage sales. Trading wasn't just fun, it felt right, like I was meant to do it. "Eliza's got her own little business empire going," my mom would joke to her friends, but there was a hint of pride in her voice that made me stand a little taller. But it was the sewing that really caught on. When I managed to buy that old sewing machine from a garage sale, it was like all my Christmases had come at once. Teaching myself to sew wasn't easy. The machine was temperamental, and the tutorials online weren't always clear, especially when the internet connection flickered in and out. But I stuck with it. Soon, I was turning drab thrift store finds into trendy outfits. "Eliza, is that the same shirt you wore last week?" Sarah sneered one day as she caught me at my locker. "Looks different." "Yep, gave it a little makeover," I said casually, slamming my locker shut. "You should try it sometime, might improve your attitude." She scoffed and strutted away, but a couple of other girls lingered. "That was really cool what you did with your shirt. Could you do mine?" one of them asked, a shy smile playing on her lips. "Sure thing. Bring it tomorrow," I replied, my heart swelling with pride. Word got around, and soon I was taking custom orders. It wasn't just pocket money anymore, it was real business. People paid good money for uniqueness, and I was all too happy to provide. One sunny afternoon, I dragged my latest creations to the local street fair. I set up a rickety table, laid out my garments, and waited, heart thumping with the thrill of it all. You think people will buy these? Mike, my friend, asked, eyeing the passers-by skeptically. They'd be crazy not to. I shot back, confidence bubbling. And buy they did. My table was swarmed. I barely had time to collect the money and hand over the clothes. Amidst the chaos, a guy approached, his car keys jangling in his hand. Hey, my car broke down a block from here. Saw your stall. This stuff yours? He asked, nodding towards my makeshift display. Yeah, all made by me. You need something to pass the time while waiting for a tow? I joked, handing him a shirt. He laughed, a genuine, head-thrown-back kind of laugh. Actually, I was wondering if you do men's stuff too. Sure do. I replied, pulling out a few pieces I'd experimented with. He looked them over, then looked at me with a spark of interest. You've got talent. Ever think of making this a real business? Every day, I said, not missing a beat. His smile widened. I'm Jack, by the way. Eliza, I said, shaking his hand, feeling the weight of the moment. This wasn't just another sale. This felt like a doorway, swinging wide open. As the day wound down, I counted the cash, a sense of accomplishment washing over me. This was it. I was making it happen, one stitch at a time. Told you they'd love your stuff, Mike said as he helped me pack up. Yes, you were right, I admitted, unable to keep the grin off my face. Looks like I might just make that $500,000 mark after all. After Jack and I met at the fair, things kicked off faster than I expected. He wasn't like the guys I knew, he came from money, but he had a way of making you forget about that when you were with him. He had this laid-back vibe, always laughing, always making plans. We started seeing each other more, and it wasn't long before we were seriously dating. One day he said, Eliza, I think it's time you met my parents. The thought alone made my stomach churn. I knew his folks came from old money, the kind that looked down on people like me. Are you sure? I asked, my voice tense. I don't think they'll like me much. Jack laughed it off. They'll love you. Don't worry so much. The drive over to Jack's parents' house felt like the longest ride of my life. Jack kept talking about mundane stuff, probably trying to ease the tension, but my stomach was in knots. We turned into a long driveway, and there it was, a massive house that looked more like a museum than a home. We walked up to the grand entrance, and the door swung open before we could even knock. There stood Jack's mom, Mrs. Thompson, dressed impeccably in a way that made me feel underdressed instantly, despite my careful choice of outfit. Jack, darling, she exclaimed, pulling him into a hug, then turned to me with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. And you must be Eliza. We've heard so much about you. Her words sounded warm, but her tone was anything but. I forced a smile. Thank you for having me, Mrs. Thompson. Jack led me inside, and that's when Mr. Thompson appeared. He was a tall, stern-looking man with a firm handshake that felt more like a test than a greeting. Eliza, a pleasure, he said, his voice deep and unemotional. We moved into the living room, which was as grand and cold as the rest of the house. Everything felt stiff and formal. We made small talk, or at least, they did. I mostly nodded and smiled, feeling out of my depth. Dinner was served in a dining room straight out of a magazine, with crystal and fine china that looked like it should be locked up in a display case, not used for eating. We sat down, and that's when the real interrogation began. So, Eliza, Jack tells us you're into fashion design, Mr. Thompson began, eyeing me like I was a problem he needed to figure out. Yes, I run a small business. I design and sell clothing, I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. Self-made then. How entrepreneurial, he commented dryly. His tone suggested it was less of a compliment and more a checkmark on a list of curiosities. Mrs. Thompson chimed in with a smile that felt more like a wince. "And your family, dear, what do they do?" "Well, it's just me and my mom. She's a nurse," I said, feeling the weight of each word. "Oh, I see," Mrs. Thompson replied, exchanging a glance with her husband that I couldn't quite read. The conversation stumbled along until coffee was served, and then Mrs. Thompson's polite mask slipped. "Eliza, I must be honest. We have certain hopes for Jack, and his partner's background is important to us. It's essential for maintaining the family's reputation and legacy." Finally, she put her fork down and said flatly, "Well, it's clear you've done quite a bit despite your background. But I don't think you're suitable for our son, I'm afraid." Her words hit like a slap. I sat there, stunned, as she got up from the table. "I won't waste more time here," she declared and left the room without another word. Jack was quick to comfort me, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Eliza, please, don't take it to heart. She said in her ways. It was tough to swallow. The evening had turned into a stark display of where I stood with his family. Despite Jack's reassurances, the shadow of that dinner lingered, casting a long, cold shadow over what should have been a happy milestone. The engagement happened despite the frosty atmosphere at dinner that night at Jack's parents' house. His folks made it clear they weren't thrilled, but Jack went ahead with the proposal. We were officially engaged, and while I was over the moon about us, the chill from his parents was something I couldn't shake off. A few weeks after our engagement, I got a call from Mrs. Thompson, Jack's mom. Her voice was formal, icy. "Eliza, I'd like you to come over. We need to discuss something important." When I arrived, both of Jack's parents were waiting. The house felt colder than ever, like all the warmth had been sucked out of it. Mrs. Thompson didn't waste any time. "Eliza, we've looked into your background thoroughly," she began, her tone sharp and unwelcoming. Mr. Thompson nodded, his face stern. "It's clear you come from a very different world than ours." His wife continued. "And frankly, we feel you're hunting for wealth, climbing through our son. But we won't allow our family fortune to be jeopardized." The words stung, but before I could react, Mrs. Thompson slid a stack of papers across the table towards me. "Since I can't convince Jack to rethink this marriage, you'll need to sign these," she said flatly. I picked up the papers. They were a prenuptial agreement. As I read through, it was clear, I wouldn't lay claim to any of Jack's wealth, and neither would any children we might have. Without hesitating, I signed them. "I'm not marrying Jack for his money," I said, handing the signed papers back to her. Mrs. Thompson looked taken aback, her eyes wide. Even Mr. Thompson raised an eyebrow, surprised by my quick compliance. I left their house feeling a mix of relief and resentment. At home, I told Jack everything. He laughed it off. "Wow, you really showed them. Good for you." But his laughter didn't sit right with me. "Aren't you bothered that your mom thinks so lowly of me? She humiliated me, Jack." He shrugged, still smiling. "I get why you're upset, but you know how Mom is. She has her reasons, and well, she's not completely wrong to worry, right?" His words felt like a slap. Not only had his mother insulted me, but now Jack was subtly defending her. It hurt, realizing that maybe he wasn't entirely in my corner. A year after our engagement, as the wedding drew closer, my life was a whirlwind of excitement and stress. My business, a sportswear brand I had started from scratch, was finally taking off. It was thrilling to see my designs being worn and loved. I had built a small capital, enough to expand and take on bigger challenges. As for the wedding, I wanted something simple, intimate. But Jack had other ideas. He dreamed of a lavish celebration. "Eliza, we're only doing this once. Let's make it big," he'd say with that grin that made it hard to argue. So, I agreed, and we planned a grand event. I found myself splitting the bill for a grand venue, exquisite catering, and a band that could keep our guests dancing all night. I managed to snag some deals, haggling discounts wherever I could. Old habits die hard. The wedding day was perfect, at least on the surface. Our guests seemed to have the time of their lives, and Jack and I couldn't stop smiling. We were floating, caught up in a bubble of joy. But not everyone was caught up in the festivity. Throughout the evening, I caught Jack's parents whispering, their faces pinched with disapproval. His mother, ever the social butterfly, floated around the room, dropping hints about her worries that I was after their family wealth. I overheard her telling a group of relatives, "It's all very extravagant, isn't it? I just hope she understands the value of money, not just spending it." Her voice was loud enough to carry, and her words stung more than I expected. After the wedding, things didn't settle down. Jack's mom posted on social media, lamenting that Jack had married someone like me. She wrote about her fear of losing her son to a woman who, in her eyes, wasn't worthy. Reading those words hurt. I felt my throat tighten and my eyes burn, not just with sadness, but with frustration. I tried to talk to Jack about it. "Your mom's posts, they're really harsh. Can you talk to them? They don't even know about the business, how well it's doing." Jack sighed, his face troubled. "Eliza, I know it's tough, but let's not rock the boat, okay? My parents, it's just how they are. But they think I'm some gold digger, Jack. They don't see that I don't need their money." He pulled me close, his voice soothing. I know. But let's just ignore it for now. They'll come around. They just need time to see what I see." I nodded, not convinced, but exhausted from the argument. I agreed to let it go, not because I thought he was right, but because I was too tired to fight. It was easier to focus on my business, pouring my energy into something positive, something that was mine. Despite the personal turmoil, my business kept growing. Orders poured in, and my brand gained a following. I was doing interviews, photo shoots, and even talking about partnerships. My days were packed, and I thrived on the hustle. The evening of the charity dinner arrived, and it was held at a swanky hotel downtown. The event was all about supporting sports programs for kids and teenagers. As the main costume designer, I had decided on a blue and white theme that matched not just the decor, but some of the latest pieces from my sportswear line. Jack and I walked into the grand hall, a room buzzing with well-dressed guests and shimmering lights. I was nervous, but excited to see my designs showcased in such a grand setting. That excitement quickly soured when we spotted his parents across the room. Their cold stares cut right through the warmth of the bustling crowd. Jack noticed but said nothing, and their blatant disregard stung me deeply, but I bit my lip and kept walking. As guests began to arrive, I circulated the room, chatting and networking. Jack was by my side, his usual charming self, but I could tell he was a bit overwhelmed by the scale of the event. "You're really pulling out all the stops, huh?" Jack commented as we watched the crowd from a distance. "Go big or go home, right?" I replied with a wink. "Eliza, you've outdone yourself," a familiar voice said from behind me. Turning around, I saw a local sports celebrity who'd worn my designs before. "These uniforms are fantastic. Thanks so much. Enjoy the evening," I smiled, handing them a business card. "Let's catch up soon." The event was buzzing, the atmosphere electric with enthusiasm and goodwill. Then, the moment of truth arrived. The host took to the stage to thank the sponsors, and my heart raced as he started to speak. We hadn't been seated long when the evening's presenter took the stage to kick off the event. The atmosphere was lively, filled with applause and cheer until it came time to thank the sponsors. My heart raced with pride and anxiety as my name was announced as one of the main contributors. I'd like to extend a special thank you to Eliza, whose generous donation of over $300,000 made tonight possible. The presenter boomed through the microphone. The room erupted in applause, but it was abruptly pierced by a shriek from Mrs. Thompson, Jack's mother. "Absolutely not," she screamed, drawing the room into a shocked silence. She demanded a microphone, and once it was handed to her, she didn't hesitate. "This is preposterous. Eliza couldn't possibly afford this. She's nothing but a poor beggar using my son's money. She's a cunning predator, sneaking into our family to bankrupt us. Her words echoed through the hall, venomous and loud. The presenter, taken aback but composed, quickly tried to correct the situation. "Mrs. Thompson, I assure you, you are mistaken. Eliza's company is extremely successful and fully capable of such generosity. I know this firsthand." The crowd murmured, the tension palpable. Then, in an unexpected move, the presenter passed the microphone to Jack, hoping for him to clear the air. Jack's face was a mix of embarrassment and conflict. He glanced at his parents, then at me, his voice barely a whisper as he spoke into the mic. "I have nothing to say." And with that, he walked over to his parents, leaving me standing alone amidst a sea of whispers. The weight of the moment settled heavy on my shoulders. I felt exposed and humiliated, not just by the accusations, but by Jack's refusal to defend me, to affirm the truth about my success. The pride I had felt in my contribution was tarnished, overshadowed by the drama unfolding around me. Stepping into the spotlight, I approached the microphone, my heart pounding, but my resolve clear. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight," I started, my voice steady, despite the tumult of emotions. "Tonight, I'd like to share something very personal about my journey." The room fell silent, all attention on me. I started as a street entrepreneur, not just to make ends meet, but driven by a dream. That dream led to the creation of a sportswear brand that many of you know now. Pausing, I looked around, meeting the eyes of young athletes and seasoned businessmen alike. When my company's profits hit $500,000, I fulfilled a promise to a very special person, my grandfather. I continued, my voice growing stronger. He left a will stating that his inheritance would go to a relative who made their own success, reaching that exact figure in their business. Whispers filled the hall, and I took a moment to let that sink in. That inheritance has been used to fuel not just my personal growth, but to give back through charity, much like tonight's event. The crowd was listening, some nodding, as I unfolded more of my story. After the pandemic, my business didn't just survive, it thrived, growing several times over. Every challenge faced was a stepping stone. As I concluded, I stand before you, not just as a business owner, but as someone who believes in the power of perseverance and dedication. The room erupted into applause, some guests standing in ovation. I scanned the crowd, seeing faces light up with respect and admiration, but my eyes briefly caught Jack's parents. Their expressions, once haughty, now showed disbelief and embarrassment. They quietly exited the hotel. Jack, looking equally shaken, tried to approach me, muttering an apology. "Eliza, I just shook my head and walked past him, my emotions a mix of triumph and heartache. I needed space, not just from the evening's drama, but from everything. I decided to stay at the hotel that night, alone with my thoughts. Later, as I sat in the quiet of my hotel room, my phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice was thick with emotion. "Honey, I saw everything. I just want you to know how proud I am. To see you stand up there, telling your story, reclaiming your truth, you're everything I hoped you'd be." After spending a night at the hotel, to clear my head, I returned home. The place felt different, heavier somehow, as if the walls themselves held the tension from the last few months. Jack was there, waiting. As soon as he saw me, he tried to apologize again. "Eliza, I'm so sorry about everything. Can we just forget all this and start over?" he pleaded, his voice desperate. I shook my head, the decision heavy on my heart, but clear in my mind. "Jack, I can't. I don't want to be with someone who can't stand up for me, who sides with his parents over his wife. It's not just about last night. This has been building for a long time." His face fell, and he reached out, but I stepped back. "I'm filing for divorce," I said firmly. I didn't wait for his response. I gathered a few essentials and left for my mother's house, the one I recently bought with the inheritance from my grandfather. It felt like a sanctuary after the storm I'd walked through. The divorce proceedings were straightforward. Thanks to the prenup we had signed, and with no children to consider, it was over quickly. During that time, Jack's parents tried to intervene. They called repeatedly, trying to patch things up, not for my sake, but because their son's lifestyle had changed now that I was out of the picture. I blocked their numbers. It wasn't just to silence the constant ringing, but to cut off a past that was holding me back. Through friends, I heard Jack started drinking, lost his job, and eventually, his parents disowned him, not wanting to tarnish their reputation with his downward spiral. I felt a pang of sorrow for him. Despite everything, I never wished him ill. But I knew I needed to move on. I couldn't dwell on what had been, only on what could be. Living at my mom's place gave me the peace I needed to think about my next steps. The business was still thriving, and I poured more of myself into it, not just to distract from the divorce, but to rebuild stronger foundations for my future. One evening, sitting in the garden my mom and I had started together, she turned to me, a soft smile on her face. "You did the right thing, Eliza. It's tough, but you're tougher. And I'm here, always." "Thanks, Mom. I know. It's just a lot to process," I replied, feeling the weight of her support. "As long as you remember that you're not just surviving, you're building, learning, and growing. That's what matters," she said, squeezing my hand. She was right. The end of my marriage wasn't just an ending. It was a gateway to a new chapter. One where I could make decisions without second-guessing if someone had my back. One where I could stand on my own, not just as a successful businesswoman, but as a person reshaped by her experiences. I'm Emily, just a regular girl working as a florist in a big city shop. Life's pretty straightforward for me: wake up, work with flowers, and sleep. But, let me tell you about the day that kinda turned everything on its head. It was a regular morning with the sun shining bright and the shop bustling with the usual crowd when he walked in. This guy, Tom, was a new face, probably in his late 20s, dressed sharp, and carried himself like he owned the place. He walked straight up to me with a confident stride. "Hey, I need a bouquet, something real special," Tom said, scanning the store but keeping a casual tone. I put together a mix of vibrant roses, delicate lilies, and some exotic orchids, making sure every stem was perfect. Handing over the bouquet, I couldn't help but add, "Whoever's getting this is super lucky. You sure know how to pick 'em." He chuckled, a bit of a smirk playing on his lips. "Oh, it's not for a lady friend, if that's what you're thinking. It's for my mom. Her birthday." I felt my cheeks heat up a bit. "Oh, right. That's sweet of you." "Yeah, well, she deserves it," he said, his tone softening. "How much do I owe you?" After watching him leave, I shook off the awkwardness and went back to work. But guess what? The next day, just as I was arranging a new batch of tulips, Tom popped back in. This time, he had a different look in his eye. "Hey, Emily, right? I was here yesterday," he started, like I could forget. "Yeah, I remember. Need another bouquet today?" I asked, wiping my hands on my apron. "Nope, not today. Actually, I was wondering if you'd like to grab coffee with me. There's a nice place just around the corner. My treat," he said, his gaze steady. I hesitated for a moment, not really sure what to make of it. Like a date? "Yeah, why not? Could be fun." He shrugged, looking casual, but hopeful. I figured why not, it's just coffee. "Sure, let me grab my bag." That coffee turned into dinner, and dinner turned into late-night talks. Tom was charming, no doubt about that. He worked for some big tech company downtown, knew a lot about a lot, and made sure our cups were never empty. Before I knew it, I was laughing more than I had in months, and he was right there with me, matching my smiles with his own. After that first coffee date, things with Tom really took off faster than I expected. He was always popping into the shop or texting me to see when I was free. He liked making plans on the fly, and I guess I liked that about him, kept things exciting. "So, what's the plan for tonight?" I asked one evening as we left the coffee shop, the city lights starting to flicker on around us. Thought we might catch a movie, then grab some dinner. How's that sound? Tom replied, his hands tucked into his jeans pockets. Sounds perfect. I smiled, happy to spend another night out with him. Movie nights turned into concert weekends, and dinners turned into midnight walks along the river. It was like we couldn't get enough of each other. Tom was all about the grand gestures too. He surprised me one night after a particularly rough day at work. "Hey, you look like you could use a break," he said as he walked into the shop, a mischievous grin on his face. "Yeah, today's been crazy. What's up?" I wiped my forehead, dropping a bunch of wilted daisies into the bin. "I think you need a change of scenery. How about we drive up to the coast this weekend? Just you and me?" He leaned on the counter, his eyes sparkling. I couldn't believe it. "Really? Like a mini vacation?" "Why not? We both could use some fresh air, and I know a great little place by the beach," he said, looking hopeful. That weekend getaway was something out of a dream. The beach was beautiful, the food was amazing, and Tom, he was perfect. We talked about everything under the sun, from our crazy childhood stories to our hopes for the future. It was during one of those deep conversations, under a sky full of stars, that he caught me off guard. "Emily, I've been thinking," he started, his voice serious for once. "Yeah?" I turned to face him, the sea breeze playing with my hair. "I don't want to scare you off or anything, but I think I'm falling for you. Hard." He took my hand, squeezing it gently. I felt my heart skip a beat. "Tom, I feel the same way." His smile then was enough to light up the darkest night. "Good, because I have something else to ask you." And just like that, a few weeks later, he was down on one knee, right there in the middle of my flower shop, with a ring that sparkled like his eyes did when he smiled. "Emily, will you marry me?" he asked, the shop filled with the scent of roses and lilies. It felt surreal, like a scene from one of those romantic movies we used to watch. But it was real, it was happening to me. "Yes, Tom, of course, I will." The cheers from my coworkers erupted around us, and Tom swept me into his arms, spinning me around. It was magical, unbelievable, and everything felt just right. When we told our families, they were over the moon. His parents hugged me tight, already calling me their daughter. My parents were just as thrilled, talking about wedding plans, and how they'd always hoped I'd find someone who made me smile like Tom did. Life after the wedding was bliss, at least, for a little while. But things started to shift when we found out I was pregnant. It should have been the happiest news, and it was, at first. Both our families were ecstatic, showering us with congratulations and gifts. But the reality of pregnancy hit me like a truck, and not in a good way. I started getting sick a lot. And I mean a lot. It wasn't just morning sickness, it was all day, can't get out of bed, can't smell anything without gagging sickness. I tried to keep working at the flower shop, but the scents that used to bring me joy were now my worst nightmare. One day, I was trying to arrange a bouquet when the nausea hit hard. I barely made it to the back room before I threw up. The decision to go on unpaid maternity leave wasn't easy. I knew it put us in a tight spot financially, but I had hoped Tom would understand. Turned out, I was half right. The day I told him about my decision, I could see the change in his demeanor instantly. His usual warm eyes went cold, and his voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. "Unpaid leave? Are you serious, Emily? How are we supposed to handle the bills with you not working?" he snapped, pacing back and forth in our tiny living room. I tried to stay calm, though inside, I was trembling. "I can't work, Tom. You've seen how bad it's gotten. And it's not like I want to be sick." His frustration boiled over, and he threw his hands up in the air. "So what, I'm supposed to just handle everything? What are you going to do all day, sit around while I bust my ass?" I flinched at his tone, feeling a sting behind my eyes. "I'll do what I can at home. I can still handle some chores, maybe start some freelance floral design from the house." "Great, Emily, really great. As if those little gigs are going to cover anything. We need real money," he cut me off, his voice laced with sarcasm. I felt so helpless and trapped, watching the man I loved turn into someone I barely recognized over money issues and my health problems. It was like a bad dream, and I kept hoping I'd wake up. Tom, please, let's just try to work this out. We're going to be parents. We need to support each other, I pleaded, reaching out to him. He looked at my hand, then at me, his anger slowly fading into resignation. I know. I'm sorry, Em. I'm just stressed, that's all. But the apologies didn't change the situation. The days were long, filled with discomfort and loneliness, as Tom buried himself in work, leaving me to deal with the pregnancy and the house as best as I could. As the weeks passed, my pregnancy only got tougher, and the chasm between Tom and me widened. My days blended into a continuous loop of discomfort and failed attempts at normalcy. Trying to keep the house together was becoming a nightmare. One evening, Tom came home to find me on the couch, a cold cloth over my forehead, trying to stave off another wave of nausea. The sight seemed to set him off instantly. Still on the couch, Emily? I thought you were going to handle the chores today, he said, his voice sharp, tinged with irritation. I sat up, feeling a surge of dizziness as I did. I tried, Tom, I really did. But the smells, everything just makes me sicker. I can't stand for too long without feeling like I'll pass out. He threw his keys on the table with a clatter. You know, when you said you'd handle things at home, I actually thought you meant it. But every day, I come back to this. I felt a sting at his words, a mix of guilt and frustration building inside me. I am trying. But doing the dishes, cooking, it all just makes me feel worse. I can't help it, Tom. Well, maybe you need to try harder. We can't live like this, Emily. I work all day, and I can't come home to a mess and no dinner. It's not fair. His voice rose, echoing off the walls. The unfairness of his expectations weighed heavily on me. I struggled to my feet, steadying myself against the back of the sofa. It's not fair to me either, Tom. I'm not just lounging around for fun. This is really hard for me. But it's like you're not even trying, he shot back, his anger palpable. All day at home, and what do you have to show for it? I'm out busting my ass to make sure we have what we need, and you can't even keep the house clean? His words cut deep, branding me as lazy and useless, and shame washed over me. But the hurt was turning into resentment. I'm carrying your child, Tom. Our child. Shouldn't that count for something? Don't you think I wish things were different? He paused, looking at me as if seeing me for the first time that evening. I know it's tough, but you calling it tough doesn't make our life any easier. I need more from you, Emily. The room felt colder, the air between us thick with unsaid things. I'm doing the best I can, I whispered, my voice breaking. His face hardened. Well, maybe your best isn't good enough. That night, as I lay in bed alone, his words replayed in my mind. I thought about reaching out to my parents or his, but I couldn't bring myself to worry them or admit how bad things had gotten. The idea of leaving, of taking refuge with my family in another city, flickered in my mind like a distant lighthouse. Yet, the thought of making such a big decision on my own was daunting. By the time I scheduled another appointment with my doctor, the tension at home was unbearable. Tom's patience was thinning by the day, and I was at my wits' end trying to balance my health with his expectations. Sitting in the waiting room, I practiced what I'd say to the doctor, hoping he might offer some kind of solution or at least validate what I was going through. When Dr. Lee called us into his office, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Emily, how are we feeling today? Dr. Lee asked as he ushered us in. I glanced at Tom, who seemed disinterested, his eyes fixed on his phone. Not great, honestly. The nausea is really bad, and it's causing some problems at home, I admitted, my voice shaky. Dr. Lee frowned, concerned. Nausea can be tough, especially if it's severe. Tom, are you aware of how this is impacting Emily? Tom looked up, slightly annoyed. Yeah, I know it's bad. But we all have our burdens, right? I work all day, and I come home to more stress. It's hard all around. The doctor nodded, his expression serious. Yes, it's hard for both of you. But it's important to understand that what Emily is experiencing is not within her control. It's a physical reaction to pregnancy hormones. Some women have it worse than others. Yeah, but how long is this supposed to last? I mean, is there something she can do to just get over it? Tom's frustration was evident. Dr. Lee took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. Unfortunately, it varies. Emily, we can try a few different medications to help manage the symptoms. It's not about getting over it, but managing it so she can have some quality of life. I nodded eagerly, grateful for any help. That sounds good, anything to help ease this. Tom shrugged, not fully convinced. So, what? Are these meds going to fix everything? Can she start doing more around the house then? It's not a cure, Dr. Lee explained patiently. It's to help her cope better. As for household duties, it might be wise to adjust your expectations during this time. Pregnancy isn't a one-size-fits-all situation. Tom sighed loudly, his impatience showing. So I'm supposed to just keep handling everything? This isn't what I signed up for. The room went silent for a moment, the tension thick. Dr. Lee looked between us, his expression softening. Tom, this is a temporary phase. It's a time when support is crucial. Perhaps, considering some temporary help at home could relieve some of the pressure. I'm not hiring someone to do chores when we're already tight on money because of the unpaid leave. Tom snapped back. Dr. Lee tried again to explain, emphasizing the reality of my symptoms and the need for empathy and support. Tom, understanding and patience are vital here. It's not about one person doing more or less, it's about adapting to challenges together. However, despite Dr. Lee's efforts, Tom's frustration seemed only to grow. He stood abruptly, shaking his head. This is all just excuses, isn't it? You just don't want to do anything. I'm tired of this. With that, he walked out of the room, leaving me behind with the doctor. Dr. Lee gave me a sympathetic look, his disappointment evident. I'm sorry, Emily. I tried. One evening, out of nowhere, Tom dropped a bombshell. So, my boss, Mr. Henderson, is throwing a big party next week. He's a big family guy, loves seeing everyone with their spouses. That means you're coming with me, Em. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. The thought of a social gathering was overwhelming with how sick I'd been feeling lately. Tom, do you think that's a good idea? With how I've been? I started, hoping he'd understand. No, Em, it's not up for discussion. Mr. Henderson notices these things. It's important for my career that we both show up, he said firmly, cutting off any protest I might have had. But the people, the noise, the smells. I don't know if I can handle it, I replied, my voice weak, already dreading the thought. Tom's expression hardened as he crossed his arms. You have to, Em. It's important for my career. Can't you just try to hold it together for a few hours? The drive to the venue was tense, with Tom going over his talking points, while I tried to steady my breathing and calm my churning stomach. When we arrived, the blast of music from inside the venue hit me like a physical wave, and the mingled perfumes and food odors made my head spin. Remember, smile and try to look like you're having a good time, Tom whispered as we entered, his grip on my arm a bit too tight. I nodded weakly, managing a smile as a few of Tom's colleagues came over to introduce themselves. They were all smiles and handshakes, but all I could focus on was the overwhelming scent of perfume and food. It wasn't long before I felt the nausea rise, fast and unforgiving. Tom, I need to step outside for a bit, I murmured after a particularly strong wave of nausea hit me. Not now, Emily, he hissed, barely looking at me. Just hold on until after dinner, please. Trying to blend into the background, I sipped on some water, hoping to settle my stomach. But it was no use. Halfway through the dinner, I could feel a cold sweat break out over my forehead, and I knew I couldn't hold back any longer. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Tom, I need to go. Now," I said, my voice urgent. Tom looked at me, frustration and embarrassment coloring his features. "Can't you see I'm in the middle of something here?" he snapped quietly, his teeth clenched. "I'm going to be sick," I whispered, feeling the room spin as people turned to look. Without waiting for him, I rushed toward the bathroom, but didn't make it. Right there, in front of all those people, my body gave up, and I was violently sick. The room went silent, save for the horrible sound of my embarrassment. When I finally stopped and looked up, tears of humiliation stinging my eyes, Tom was by my side, but his look was not one of concern. "You just had to make a scene, huh?" he muttered, helping me up not out of kindness, but to get me out of sight. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight and painful, and dragged me into the corridor. "Look what you've done. You're a pretender, Emily. Always making excuses," he yelled, his face inches from mine. I tried to pull away, feeling overwhelmed and scared. "Tom, please, I'm really sick." "Enough. I'm sick of your excuses. Get out of here on your own. I'm done dealing with this tonight," he shouted. He shoved me towards the exit, pushing me several times as I stumbled. Finally, he threw me into the hallway and stormed off. I leaned against the wall, gasping for air, my body weak from nausea and my heart breaking from his cruelty. Leaning against the wall of the corridor, I felt utterly humiliated and abandoned. My tears were just starting to dry when I heard footsteps approaching. An elderly man, whom I hadn't noticed before, came up to me, his expression concerned. I heard some yelling. "What happened here?" he asked in a stern but caring voice. I couldn't hold it in anymore. The tears started again, and I found myself pouring out everything. "My husband, he just doesn't understand. He thinks I'm pretending to be sick because of the pregnancy. He left me here after I got sick in front of everyone." The man's face turned sharply stern as he listened. "What's your husband's last name?" he asked with an intensity that made me shiver. "Morris. Tom Morris," I managed to say through sobs. His demeanor softened a bit as he nodded, understanding the situation better. "Come with me," he said gently, leading me to a quieter part of the venue, away from the noise and the overwhelming smells. He found an empty table, pulled out a chair for me, and handed me a glass of cool water. Sitting there, sipping water, helped me calm down a bit. The man remained with me, ensuring I was all right. Soon, the solemn part of the party began, and he excused himself saying he had to take the stage. I watched as he walked up, and to my shock, the crowd erupted into applause. The man, now at the podium, started praising his employees for their commitment to family values. Then, his tone changed, and he started talking about respect for one's spouse. "There is a man here," he said, turning to look directly at Tom, "who has failed to show the respect and support a husband should to his wife." Tom's face went pale as he was called up to the stage. I watched, frozen, as Tom walked up to join the man, the same man who had just helped me. "My wife and I have 4 children," the man continued, his voice stern and loud enough for everyone to hear. "And I understand how different each pregnancy can be. It is no excuse to mistreat or doubt your spouse." Tom tried to defend himself, stammering about how it was all a misunderstanding, how he thought I was just avoiding responsibilities. The murmurs in the hall grew loud, filled with disbelief and disapproval. The man on the stage, who I now understood was Mr. Henderson, Tom's boss, responded firmly, "That is no way to treat anyone, especially not your pregnant wife." His next words dropped like a hammer. "Tom Morris, you are no longer employed at this company. We respect family values here, something you've clearly forgotten." After the party, Mr. Henderson drove me back to my house. He made sure Tom wouldn't cause any trouble while I packed up my belongings. It was surreal, gathering my life into boxes with Tom's boss watching over things, ensuring everything stayed civil. Tom was silent, his anger from the night before replaced by a sullen quiet. Mr. Henderson didn't say much either, but his presence was a solid reassurance that I wasn't alone in this. Once everything was packed, Mr. Henderson drove me to a hotel. The next few weeks were a blur of finding a new apartment and dealing with the legalities of separation. When Tom's parents heard about what had happened, they reached out, full of apologies and offers to help. Despite everything, I was grateful for their support. They helped me cover the rent for my new place for several months. Life in my new apartment was quiet. I spent days preparing for the baby and nights wondering about the future. When my son Jack was born, it was like a light came back into my life. Holding him for the first time, I knew that no matter what had happened, starting over had been the right decision. Divorce proceedings were tough. Tom fought against it at first, but eventually gave in. Mr. Henderson was instrumental once again, providing a corporate lawyer to handle my case. The lawyer was sharp and empathetic, helping me secure a settlement that included compensation for emotional abuse and child support. The financial security was a relief. It meant I could start anew without constant worry. With my life somewhat stabilized, I returned to the flower shop. Mrs. Jenkins, my boss, welcomed me back with open arms. "We've missed you, Emily. The flowers haven't been the same without you," she said on my first day back. Working again felt therapeutic. Arranging bouquets, advising customers, and tending to the plants, I found peace and a sense of normalcy that had been missing from my life for too long. One afternoon, while arranging a particularly beautiful set of roses, my phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson checking in. "Just wanted to see how you and Jack are doing, Emily," he said, his voice warm over the phone. "We're doing well, thank you. Back at work, and it feels right," I responded, smiling as I snipped the stem of a rose. "That's great to hear. Remember, you ever need anything, I'm just a call away." Ending the call, I looked around at my surroundings, the colorful flowers, the photos of Jack I had pinned up by my workstation, and the gentle hum of daily life in the shop. It all felt like a new chapter had truly begun. My name's Jess. I've always been the kind who gets things done on her own. By the time I was 33, I was deep into my career, not even thinking about settling down, despite the occasional admirer. But, as they say, life happens when you're busy making other plans. It was a regular Wednesday evening, and I was about to head home from work when my car decided it had other ideas. There I was, stranded in the office parking lot, hood up, hands on my hips, cursing under my breath at the smoking engine. That's when Tom walked over. I noticed him a few times around the lot. He worked in another part of the building. Tall, with a kind of quiet confidence about him, he had that look that said he could handle just about anything. "Car trouble?" he asked, an eyebrow raised as he approached. "You could say that," I replied, trying not to show my frustration. "It just started making this awful noise, and then smoke everywhere." Tom chuckled, which normally would tick me off, but there was something genuine about it that kept me calm. "Mind if I take a look?" "Be my guest." I gestured towards the open hood. "I'm Jess, by the way." "Tom," he said, extending a grease-free hand, surprisingly. "Let's see what's going on with this old beast." He poked around for a minute, then straightened up, wiping his hands. "It's your alternator, I'd bet my last dollar on it. You're not going anywhere tonight unless you get it towed." "Great, just my luck." "Fantastic," I sighed. "Thanks for the diagnosis." Tom laughed again, pulling out his phone. "I've got a buddy who owns a shop not too far from here. Let me call him and see if he can help us out." While he talked on the phone, I couldn't help but notice how easy it was to just stand there with him. It wasn't like me to feel comfortable with a stranger so quickly. "All right, he can tow your car tonight, and he'll look at it first thing tomorrow. I can give you a lift home if you need," Tom offered after he hung up. I hesitated for a moment. Mom always said not to get in cars with strangers, but then again, I wasn't exactly a kid anymore. "Sure, that'd be great. Thanks, Tom." "No problem. Just trying to be helpful," he said with a smile. Besides, it's not every day I get to rescue a damsel in distress. Whoa there, cowboy. I shot back playfully, I'm no damsel, and I'm not in distress. I just have a stubborn car. Noted. Tom grinned as we walked to his car. Stubborn car, tough owner. The drive was short but filled with easy conversation. We talked about work, our favorite places to eat around town, and some of the crazy experiences we had at our jobs. It was refreshing to talk to someone so normal. When he dropped me off at my apartment, he handed me a business card. In case you need a ride to the shop tomorrow, or if your car gives you more grief. I took the card, a small smile playing on my lips. Thanks, Tom. Maybe I'll call you, and not just for car troubles. He winked as he drove off, leaving me there with a weird feeling in my stomach. Excitement? Maybe. For the first time in a long while, I was actually looking forward to what tomorrow might bring. After Tom and I met, things moved pretty fast in a good way. He was open right from the start, which I respected a lot. But as we got closer, he started to share more about his family dynamics, and it wasn't the pretty picture I was used to growing up with. Tom's older brother, Mike, had always been the golden boy in the eyes of their parents, especially their mom, Linda. According to Tom, Linda doted on Mike, always talking him up as the smartest and most successful. Mike got more attention, more praise, and yeah, more of everything else too. Tom seemed to have made his peace with being the second fiddle, but for someone like me, who came from a family where love and fairness were a big deal, it was hard to swallow. I remember telling Tom, "It's not right, you know. You're just as great as anyone, Mike included." Tom just shrugged, a little uncomfortable. "That's just how it is, Jess. I've dealt with it. Let's not make waves, okay?" The first time I met Linda, it was clear she wasn't thrilled about me. It wasn't anything she said outright, it was more the way she talked about Mike in front of us, barely acknowledging Tom's achievements. "Mike just got promoted again. Can you believe it? We're so proud," she'd gush, while Tom just nodded along. Despite all that, I still tried to make a connection, but it felt like hitting a brick wall. Eventually, I realized maybe Tom and I were better off without trying so hard to win them over. 2 years down the line, Tom and I decided to tie the knot. It wasn't a big affair, just something small, with a few close friends and family. Mike, surprisingly, was genuinely happy for us, which was more than I could say for Linda and her husband. They showed up, sure, but there wasn't much joy in their congratulations. At the reception, I caught Linda boasting to another relative about Mike's latest business venture, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. I was mingling nearby with some of our friends when Tom caught my eye, a look of resignation on his face. I walked over to him, squeezing his hand. "Hey, let them talk about whatever. Today's about us, right?" I whispered. "Right." Tom nodded, giving me a small smile. "Thanks for putting up with all this, Jess." When Mike and his wife welcomed their first child, a boy, the entire family went all out. I mean, it was like a royal celebration. Linda threw a huge bash, balloons, cake, the works. Her social media was on fire with photos and posts about being the world's happiest grandma. The love and pride she poured into that event were obvious to anyone who saw it. A year later, Tom and I had our little Emily, and the contrast in Linda's reaction couldn't have been starker. There was no big party, no social media fanfare. Honestly, it stung more than I thought it would. When Linda called to congratulate us, her voice carried that formal tone reserved for acquaintances, not family. "Congratulations, Jess, Tom. A girl, that's nice," she'd said, her enthusiasm as flat as a pancake. "Thanks, Linda. We're really excited." I tried to keep my voice bright, but it was hard. "That's wonderful. Let me know when you have the baptism planned. I'll make sure to clear my schedule," she replied, and that was pretty much it. At Emily's baptism, the disparity became even more obvious. Linda came, of course, she's the grandma after all, but her whole demeanor was so offhand it might as well have been another Sunday service for her. While we were setting up the hall for the small gathering after the ceremony, I overheard Linda talking to one of her friends. "Oh, Mike's boy is just starting to walk. It's incredible how quickly he's picking it up. We think he'll be quite the athlete." Feeling a bit irked, I walked over to Tom, who was arranging chairs and didn't seem to notice his mother's gushing about his nephew. "Tom, doesn't it bother you? The way your mom is all over your nephew and just here for Emily?" Tom looked up, a slight frown creasing his brow. "Yeah, it does. But what can we do, Jess? It's how she is. Mike's always been the star. But Emily's your star, our star. Doesn't she deserve the same?" I pushed back, not ready to drop it. Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Of course, she does. And she'll always have us. I know it's not the same, but..." "But nothing," I cut in, my frustration peaking. "She should care more, Tom. It's not fair to Emily." "You think I don't know that? But confronting my mom, it's just going to make things worse. She won't change," he said, almost pleadingly. As the day went on, I tried to shake off the feeling of disappointment. I focused on our friends and the part of the family that was thrilled for us. Emily was a bundle of joy, oblivious to the adult tension swirling around her. Post-baptism, we had a little party back at our place. Linda stayed a bit, mostly keeping to herself or chatting with Tom's dad, who seemed to be trying to make up for his wife's lack of enthusiasm by being extra cheerful. As Linda was leaving, I decided to try one more time. "Linda, we missed seeing you with Emily today. She's getting so big already, isn't she?" Linda paused, her keys in hand, and actually looked at me for a moment. "Yes, she is. Time flies. Well, take care of her. And let me know if you need anything." Emily grew more curious and chatty as she hit her 3rd birthday. Kids, they notice more than you think, and it wasn't long before she started asking about her grandparents. "Mommy, why doesn't Grandma Linda come to see me like she sees Cousin Jack?" Emily's little voice was full of innocent confusion one evening while we were looking at family photos online. I paused, not sure how to explain family politics to a 3-year-old. "Well, sweetie, Grandma Linda is very busy, and she lives a bit far away. But we see her on special days, right?" It was a weak excuse, and even Emily seemed to sense it. "But she sees Jack all the time. He has lots of pictures with her," Emily pointed out, her brow furrowing slightly. Tom, overhearing us from the dining room where he was fixing one of Emily's broken toys, came over and knelt beside her. "Hey, Pumpkin, Grandma loves you a lot too. We all show our love in different ways, okay?" Emily looked at him, then at me, and nodded, though it was clear she didn't fully buy it. "Okay, Daddy." The conversation didn't sit well with me. That night, after Emily went to bed, I brought it up with Tom. We were in the kitchen, me sipping my tea while he cleaned up. "Tom, this isn't right. Emily's noticing the difference. How long before it starts affecting her?" I said, my voice low but firm. Tom put down the dish he was drying and leaned against the counter. "I know, Jess. It sucks. But what do you suggest we do? Confront my mom? At least let her know how we feel. It's not just about visits. It's the way she's being treated compared to Jack. It could hurt her, growing up feeling less loved," I argued, feeling my frustration rise. Tom sighed heavily. "I'll talk to her. I'm not expecting miracles, but maybe if she realizes it's affecting Emily." "Thank you," I said, feeling a mix of relief and dread. A few days later, Tom and I decided to visit Linda without Emily. We arrived at her house, and after some initial small talk, Tom steered the conversation to what was on our minds. "Mom, we need to talk about something important," Tom began, his tone more serious than usual. Linda looked between us, her expression cautious. "What's wrong? Is it Emily?" "It's about Emily, and you," Tom continued. "She's been asking why you don't visit her like you do Jack. It's starting to affect her." Linda stiffened, her face tightening. "I see all my grandchildren when I can. You know how busy I am. But Mom, it's not just about time. It's about how differently you treat them. Emily feels it. We feel it, I added, trying to keep my voice calm but firm. Linda's eyes flashed. Are you accusing me of favoring my grandchildren? Not accusing, Mom. It's just what's happening. We're worried about Emily, Tom explained, his voice steady. Linda sighed, looking away for a moment before meeting our eyes again. I'll try to do better. But I don't like being told how to be a grandmother. We're not telling you how to be a grandmother. We just want Emily to feel as loved as Jack, I said, hoping she'd understand the difference. Linda nodded slowly, her posture relaxing slightly. I'll make more of an effort. That's all I can promise. That night, as I checked on Emily, asleep and peaceful in her bed, I felt a renewed sense of protectiveness. Whatever Linda's response would be, Tom and I were determined to make sure Emily grew up knowing she was loved and valued, no less than anyone else in the family. Emily's 7th birthday was coming up, and she was all excited about her party. The house was decorated with balloons and streamers, and Emily was buzzing around in her favorite princess costume. Guests started arriving, and the kids were having a blast. I kept an eye on the door, waiting for Linda and George. They finally showed up, about half an hour late. Linda had a small, somewhat dusty-looking gift bag in her hand. Emily ran up to them, excited. Grandma, Grandpa, she squealed, hugging George tightly. Happy birthday, sweetheart, George said, hugging her back. Linda handed Emily the gift bag with a tight smile. Here you are, dear. Happy birthday, she said, her voice lacking warmth. Emily opened the gift right away. It was a small stuffed animal, clearly not new. Oh, thank you, Grandma. Emily tried to hide her disappointment. I caught Tom's eye, and he frowned slightly. We both saw the letdown on Emily's face. I was about to say something when Carly, my friend, who'd overheard some guests talking, pulled me aside. Jess, did you hear about Linda's gift to Jack last week? A whole space-themed party with a professional telescope and all. And Emily gets that? Carly nodded towards the stuffed animal. I clenched my fists, feeling my face heat up. I can't believe this. Every time, Carly. It's like she does it on purpose. The party continued with lots of guests and relatives mingling and enjoying the day. Suddenly, I noticed Emily wasn't around. I found her crying in one of the rooms. Sweetie, what happened? I asked, kneeling beside her. Mommy, Cousin Jack said I'm a second-class person and I need to wash up before I can play with him, she sobbed, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I felt a surge of anger. He said what? I stood up, stormed into the living room, and pulled Tom aside. Tom, Jack is bullying Emily. He just told her she's second class. Tom's face turned red with anger. What? I'll sort this out. He immediately went to find his brother, Mike. Mike was taken aback. I don't understand, Tom. Jack's just a kid. Where'd he get that idea? Nearby, Jack, unaware of the grown-up tensions, casually mentioned, Grandma said not to play with Emily. She told me. Silence fell over the room. Everyone turned to look at Linda, who was visibly embarrassed. This is unacceptable, Linda. You need to apologize, one of the guests said out loud. Others murmured in agreement. Linda, cornered and flustered, muttered a reluctant apology and, looking at Emily, added, I'm sorry, dear. How about we spend some time next week, just you and me? Despite my doubts, I agreed. Maybe this was a chance for Linda to right her wrongs. I nodded, hoping for the best. Okay, Linda. Let's try that. After the birthday party fiasco, things were tense at home. Tom and I knew we couldn't let it slide. It was more than just about a gift, it was about how Linda's attitude was affecting our daughter. We needed to have a real, no-holds-barred conversation with her. The following week, we decided to meet with Linda at her house. On the drive over, Tom seemed nervous, gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. You okay? I asked, touching his arm gently. Yeah, just not looking forward to this talk. But it's got to be done, for Emily, he replied, his voice steady but strained. We arrived and found Linda in her garden, pruning some bushes. She looked up, wiping sweat from her brow with a dirty glove. Tom, Jess, what brings you here? Something wrong? Linda's voice was cautious, a hint of defensiveness already lacing her tone. We need to talk, Mom. About what happened at Emily's party, Tom said, getting straight to the point. Linda sighed, setting down her gardening shears. I thought this might be coming. Let's go inside. Once in the living room, I decided to kick things off. Linda, what Jack said at the party, and your behavior, it's hurting Emily. She feels less loved, and that's not okay. Linda crossed her arms, her back straightening. I already apologized for that. Jack's words were unfortunate, but kids say things without meaning them. It's more than just Jack, Linda. It's about how you treat her differently from her cousin. It sends a message, not just to the kids but to everyone. I pressed, trying to keep my voice calm but firm. Linda looked away, then back at us. I do the best I can. I've always favored boys, it's just how I was raised. But I love all my grandchildren. But your actions don't show that, Linda. Actions speak louder than words, Tom interjected, his tone more forceful than I'd heard in a long time. There was a pause, heavy with tension, before Linda finally spoke, her voice softer, almost vulnerable. Maybe I've been wrong. It's hard for me to admit, but perhaps I haven't been fair to Emily. Tom and I exchanged a quick glance, surprised by her admission. I don't know how to fix this overnight, but I'm willing to try. For Emily, Linda continued, her eyes meeting mine, then Tom's. We appreciate that, Linda. Maybe start by spending some quality time with Emily. Just the two of you, I suggested, hoping to bridge the gap. Linda nodded. I'd like that. I'll call and set something up. A day at the zoo, perhaps? She likes animals, doesn't she? She does, I smiled, feeling a glimmer of hope. It was supposed to be a fresh start. Linda had promised to spend the whole day with Emily, just the two of them, which I thought was a great step towards mending their relationship. So, you can imagine my surprise when I saw her grandson, Jack, climbing into the car with them. Linda, I thought today was about you and Emily spending time together, I said, a bit confused as we stood by her car. I know, Jess, but I thought it would be good for them to have some time together too, to reconcile and fix things from the birthday party, Linda replied, sounding like she had the best intentions. Although hesitant, I didn't want to argue in front of the kids. Alright, just make sure Emily has a good time too, I said, and gave Emily a little hug and a kiss. You've got your phone, sweetie. Call me if you need anything, okay? I will, Mommy, Emily said, a bit uncertain, but trying to be brave as she climbed into the car. I watched them drive off, feeling a mix of emotions, but hoping for the best. Several hours later, my phone rang. It was Emily, and she was crying. Mommy, I'm so cold and I'm scared. She sobbed into the phone, her voice quivering. Baby, where are you? Why are you cold? It's warm outside, I said, my heart starting to race with worry. I'm at the ice rink, Mommy. Grandma went somewhere with Jack. I don't know where they are, she cried, and my worry turned into anger. The ice rink? Emily, why are you at an ice rink? Did Grandma not tell you where she was going? She said we were going for a walk, and then we came here. I didn't bring my jacket, Mommy. It's so cold, she continued, her voice shaking. Okay, sweetheart, find someone who works there, maybe at the desk or a coach, and give them the phone, I instructed, trying to keep my voice calm for her sake. A few minutes later, a man came on the line. Hello, I'm the skating instructor here. Your daughter was left unsupervised. We're keeping her safe and warm here with us. Thank you. I'm on my way, I'll be there as fast as I can, I replied, my voice firm, but my mind reeling with frustration and anger. As I drove to the rink, my thoughts were a whirlwind. Why would Linda think it was okay to leave Emily at an ice rink alone? And where had she gone with Jack that was so important? When I reached the skating rink, Emily was safe, thankfully, but the scene was a mess. The rink staff had already called the police and the custody service due to the nature of the situation. My heart was pounding as I explained everything to the officers, detailing how Linda had irresponsibly left Emily alone and in an inappropriate environment. The grandma brought them here, skated for a bit, and then just took off with the boy when he fell, the skating instructor told the police, shaking his head. The little girl was shivering in her t-shirt and shorts. I was furious, listening to him. She's just a child, how could someone think she'd be okay alone in such a place? I said, my voice cracking with emotion as I gave my statement. The police took everything seriously. They confirmed with the mall security that Linda had been there with the kids for about an hour before rushing off, leaving Emily behind. The more they learned, the angrier I felt. I called Linda right there, needing answers. Linda, what were you thinking? Emily could have been seriously hurt. Jack was hurt, he needed me. Emily was fine when I left, Linda responded, her tone dismissive as if it was a minor oversight. Fine? You left her alone, Linda. She was freezing and terrified. I snapped back, hardly believing her lack of concern. After hanging up with Linda, I called Tom to tell him everything. He was livid, beyond upset. This is unforgivable, Jess. I'm going to make sure this gets handled properly, he said, his voice firm and resolute. The fallout was immediate and severe. The police conducted a thorough investigation, and Linda was fined heavily. Due to the circumstances, she was also barred from any unsupervised visits with Emily. When Tom's brother, Mike, heard about what had happened, he and his wife were appalled and pulled back from Linda, condemning her actions outright. Tom's dad, George, also got involved, upset about the entire situation. I'm sorry, Tom. I should have stepped in sooner. I followed her lead for too long, he confessed one evening over the phone. He even mentioned that this strain had pushed him to consider a divorce, unable to align with Linda's actions and attitudes any longer. It seemed the whole family dynamic was unraveling because of this incident. Through all this, my resolve only strengthened. Watching how everything unfolded made it clear to me that as a parent, my first and most important job was to protect Emily. I promised myself and her that I'd always be her advocate and shield, no matter what. I'm Ella, knee-deep in the world of fashion and celebs, juggling brushes and eyeshadow palettes like a pro. My life's a whirlwind of glitz, but underneath the foundation and the flash, I'm just a girl who stumbled into love when I least expected it. It was one of those rare nights off. I almost skipped the bash at Jenna's, thinking about crashing on my couch with some takeout. But fate had other plans. That's where I met Daniel. He was no movie star, but man, did he have that charm. First thing he said to me? Wow, do they serve drinks here, or do I gotta flirt with you to get one? I laughed, despite myself. Try flirting, see where it gets you. And flirt we did, the whole night. Between the laughs and the banter, I felt like I'd known him forever. He wasn't in the biz, worked some tech job, but that night, none of it mattered. Fast forward through a whirlwind romance, and bam, we're hitched. The wedding was something out of a movie, thanks to my connections and his charm. Then came the house, a gift from my folks. It's too much, I told them. Nothing's too much for our little girl, my dad said, his arm around Mom, both of them beaming. Daniel was over the moon about the place. Babe, this house, it's unreal. Look at that garden. And the terrace? Can't wait to chill there with a beer at sunset. The first few months flew by in a blur of happiness. Mornings on the terrace, evenings tangled up on the couch, it was like living in a dream. I could get used to this, Daniel whispered one night, kissing my forehead. Better not get too used to it. Remember, we gotta pay the bills too, I joked, nudging him playfully. With you, babe, I'd live in a cardboard box. But this, he gestured around at our lavish living room. This is a nice bonus. Our conversations were simple, filled with plans for the weekend, teasing each other, or deciding what masterpiece we'd attempt to cook up for dinner. You know, I could get used to your terrible cooking, Daniel would say, dodging the dish towel I threw at him. Terrible? You were begging for seconds last night, I'd retort, trying to keep a straight face. It was real, it was us. No pretense, no filters. Just Ella and Daniel against the world. Or so I thought. Life was rolling smooth until it wasn't. Daniel started missing dinners, his side of the bed cold when I'd crash late at night. Work's a beast, babe, he'd text, the same excuse on repeat. One evening, I waited up, the clock ticking past midnight. The door creaked open, and there he was, looking like a mess. Work again? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Yeah, you know how it is. He mumbled, avoiding my gaze. No, I don't, Daniel. My friends get off work at decent hours. What's so special about yours? He shrugged, a tired smile not reaching his eyes. Just projects, babe. Big ones. I let it slide, not wanting to start a fight. But the seed of doubt? It was planted, watered by whispers and late nights. Then came the bomb. Jenna, always the gossip queen, cornered me at the gym. Ella, girl, you didn't hear it from me, but Daniel's been cozying up to someone. I laughed it off. Yeah, right. Daniel? He can't even flirt without tripping over his words. Suit yourself. Just saying, eyes open. The words gnawed at me, festering into a confrontation one night. So, who's she? I spat, my patience worn thin. Daniel looked like I'd slapped him. Who's who? What the hell, Ella? Don't play dumb. You're screwing around, aren't you? His face turned red, anger and something else, guilt, flashing in his eyes. I'm busting my ass at work for us, and this is what I get. Accusations? We both know you're lying. Just admit it. He slammed his fist on the table, making me jump. Fine. You want the truth? I've been working late. No affair, no mystery woman. Just work. I wanted to believe him, God, I did. But the lies were there, hidden behind late returns and missed calls. We yelled, threw accusations like grenades, our love caught in the crossfire. Maybe we rushed into this, I shouted, tears blurring my vision. Maybe we did, he shot back, his voice cold. Silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Thoughts of divorce danced in my head, a bitter end to a sweet start. But love, it's a stubborn thing. We sought help, clutching at straws, desperate to save what was left. A family psychologist, Dr. Lisa, became our referee, calling out fouls and starting plays. Why are you two here? She asked, notepad ready. We're fighting. A lot, I started, my voice small. Daniel chimed in. I work late, and she thinks I'm having an affair. Dr. Lisa looked between us. Is that all? We nodded, the room heavy with unsaid words. Okay, let's unpack this. Ella, why do you feel he's cheating? Because he's never home. And when he is, it's like he's not really here. And Daniel, your side? I'm trying to provide for us. But she doesn't see that. She only sees what she wants. The sessions were tough, each word a step through a minefield. But slowly, we started finding our way back to each other, learning to trust, to talk. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Think we can make it? I asked one night, our hands tentatively linked. Daniel squeezed my hand. Yeah, babe. We're gonna make it. We were battered, maybe a little broken, but together. And at that moment, it felt like enough. After all the turmoil and heartache, I started believing that maybe, just maybe, a baby could bridge the gap between Daniel and me. It was a desperate thought, but hope has a way of blooming in desperate soil. However, getting pregnant turned out to be a journey of its own. Turns out, I had some issues on my end, a kind of cruel irony, given our situation. It took 6 long, grueling years of trying, hoping, and countless doctor's visits before I finally saw those 2 pink lines. I was over the moon, filled with a happiness so intense it was almost terrifying. This baby, our baby, was a symbol of hope, a testament to perseverance. I couldn't wait to tell Daniel, imagining his joy mirroring mine. But when I shared the news, his reaction was like a splash of cold water on my face. "Oh, that's great," he said, his voice flat, his smile forced. It was as if I'd told him the weather forecast, not that we were going to be parents. I couldn't hide my disappointment. "Great? You don't seem excited," I accused, feeling my own excitement dim. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I am, Ella. It's just a lot to take in, you know? I mean, a kid? We're going to be parents?" "Yeah, I know. It's scary, but it's also amazing, isn't it?" I tried to find the enthusiasm in his eyes, but found none. He nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, amazing." The conversation felt like hitting a brick wall. I'd imagined this moment differently in my head. Dreamed of it, even. But reality has a funny way of knocking you down a peg or two. Despite the awkward start, I clung to the hope that a baby would bring us even closer, seal the cracks that had formed in our marriage. "We need to think about the future, Daniel. For our baby," I said, hoping to ignite some spark of excitement in him. He agreed, though his enthusiasm felt as forced as his smile. "Of course. We'll figure it out. We always do." As the weeks passed, my belly grew, but the distance between us remained. Daniel tried, I could see that. He'd come home earlier, ask about my appointments, and even painted the nursery without complaint. But something was off. It was like he was going through the motions, doing what he thought was expected of him, not what he wanted. And then our miracle was born, and I was not up to it. Life with a newborn should have been about diaper changes, midnight feedings, and those quiet moments of wonder watching your baby sleep. Instead, it felt like I was living with a ghost. The whole cycle started again, like a bad rerun of a show you hated but couldn't stop watching. Daniel turned back into the man I feared would reappear. His promises to change, to be present, felt like empty words, vanishing into thin air the moment they were spoken. Late nights at work became his new norm, each excuse more elaborate than the last. First, once a week, then almost every day. "Work's crazy, babe. You know how it is," he'd say, his voice a rehearsed tape I'd played too many times in my head. One night, as I rocked our son to sleep, I heard the front door creak open. It was late, way past when normal people finish work. I waited for Daniel to come upstairs, to sneak a peek at his sleeping son or even attempt a whispered apology for missing yet another bedtime. But there was nothing. Just the soft snuffle of our baby and the distant sound of the TV flicking on downstairs. I couldn't stand it. Wrapping our son a little tighter in his blanket, I made my way downstairs, ready for a confrontation. I found Daniel sprawled on the couch, eyes glued to some late-night show. "Really, Daniel? Another late night? This is becoming a habit," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, not wanting to wake the baby. He glanced at me, irritation flickering across his face. "What do you want me to say, Ella? That I'm out partying? I'm working, for God's sake." "Working? Or avoiding us?" The words spilled out, bitter and sharp. Daniel stood up, his expression hard. "You think I don't want to be here? With my son?" There was a challenge in his voice, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I don't know what to think anymore, Daniel. You're never here. And when you are, you're not really with us." My voice broke, a mix of anger and desperation. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm trying, Ella. You think I don't know I'm screwing up? But what do you want from me?" "I want you to be a father, to be present. Not just a guest in your own home." I was shouting now, the frustration of the past weeks, months, boiling over. Daniel looked away, the fight going out of him. "I'm sorry. I'll try harder. I promise. Promises. We'd had plenty of those. Yet, as I looked into his face, searching for something, anything, to cling to, I realized I wanted to believe him. For our son, for us, I had to believe him. Okay. I whispered, more to myself than to him. But we can't keep going like this. We need to make some changes. 2 more months have passed, and Daniel's work has not gone away. His promises to change, to be present, felt like empty words, vanishing into thin air the moment they were spoken. Late nights at work became his new norm, each excuse more elaborate than the last. One night, I couldn't stand the silence, the doubt eating away at me. I confronted him, my voice laced with a tiredness that went beyond sleepless nights with a newborn. Are you seeing someone else, Daniel? His reaction was swift, a mix of anger and indignation that felt too rehearsed. What? No. How can you even say that? I'm working my ass off for this family. His denial was strong, his gaze steady, but so was the pit in my stomach, growing with every word he said. I wanted to believe him, to wipe the slate clean and start fresh, but history and intuition screamed a warning I couldn't ignore. I nodded, a brittle smile plastered on my face. Okay, I believe you. The words tasted like ash. I was lying to him, to myself. Pretending to trust when every fiber of my being screamed that I was being played for a fool, again. The day everything came crashing down started like any other, except for a message that popped up on my social media. A message from a woman I didn't know, claiming she was Daniel's lover. My first reaction was disbelief, a cold laugh escaping me as I thought, this has to be some sick joke. But curiosity, that gnawing worm, drove me to her profile, and that's when the floor fell out from under me. Pictures of her and Daniel, looking cozy and way too familiar, smiles that I hadn't seen directed at me in months. And the kids, 3 little faces that bore an unsettling resemblance to the man I called my husband. My heart wasn't just broken, it was obliterated. I didn't confront him over the phone or blast him with angry texts. No, I waited. I waited with a storm brewing inside me, the photos burning a hole through my phone. When he walked through the door that night, the air was thick with my rage, a silent tension that made him pause. Ella? What's wrong? Daniel asked, already on edge as he saw the look on my face. Without a word, I slid my phone across the table to him, the photos displayed like evidence at a crime scene. His face went white, his eyes flicking between the screen and me, searching for an explanation where there was none. Ella, I can explain, he started, the words choking in his throat as he tried to piece together a defense out of lies. Explain? Explain what, Daniel? How you have another family. How you lied to us every day. My voice was sharp, a blade honed by betrayal. He attempted to touch the phone, perhaps to delete the evidence or simply out of a reflex, to hide his guilt. It's not like that. It's complicated. Complicated? I laughed, a sound devoid of any humor. I think it's pretty simple. You cheated. You lied. You led a double life at the expense of our family. What's complicated about that? Daniel's face was a mask of desperation, the reality of his choices finally hitting him. Ella, please. I made a mistake. I can fix this. Fix this? How, Daniel? By pretending those kids don't exist? By erasing what you did? The absurdity of it all fueled my anger. I don't know. But I want to make things right. His voice was barely a whisper, a plea for a mercy he didn't deserve. Right? There's no right here, Daniel. Only wrong. And you chose that path, not me. My voice was steady now, the decision clear in my heart. He opened his mouth to say something else, maybe another excuse or a promise he couldn't keep, but I was done. I want you out, Daniel. Out of this house. Out of our lives. The resignation in his eyes told me he knew it was over. He packed a bag, his movements slow, like he was still processing the end of everything we had. As he stood at the door, a pathetic figure clutching a duffel bag of lies, he looked back at me. Ella, Just go. My interruption was final, the closing of a book I never wanted to read again. And with that, he left, the silence of the house a heavy blanket around me. It was over, the end of a chapter one never saw coming. But in that moment, I knew it was just the beginning of something else for me. A few days later, there was a pounding at the door, so fierce it made me jump. I barely had time to react before she barged in, the woman from the photos, with Daniel cowering behind her like a child caught stealing candy. She wasted no time, strutting through my home like she owned the place, eyeing every room with a calculating gaze. Daniel wouldn't meet my eye, his shame a tangible thing that filled the room even more than his mistress's arrogance. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes cold. "You need to leave. Take your kid and go. A tiny apartment should be enough for the two of you." I stared at her, disbelief and anger warring inside me. "Excuse me?" She crossed her arms, smirking. "You heard me. I have 3 kids with him. We need this house more than you do." I glanced at Daniel, expecting him to say something, anything. But he remained silent, a spectator in his own life's destruction. "And you'll be leaving by next week," she added, as if announcing a change in the weather, not uprooting my entire life. As they left, Daniel not daring to say a word, the absurdity and audacity of the situation sank in. The woman who helped break my marriage now wanted to take my home, too. It was surreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. A week had dragged by, and as promised, the doorbell rang with an urgency that only someone deluded enough to think they owned the place would have. Opening the door, I found them, the unlikely duo, Daniel's mistress, oozing false confidence, and Daniel, looking like a man who'd lost at his own game. "You're still here?" the mistress spat out, her eyes darting around, taking in the unchanged scene within. "Why wouldn't I be? It's my house," I shot back, leaning against the doorway, finding strength in my stance. Her eyes flickered to Daniel, seeking some kind of affirmation. He, with a shrug that carried the weight of his lies, managed to mumble, "We bought this house together after the wedding. It's as much mine as it is yours." I couldn't help but laugh. It was either that or scream. "Bought? My parents gifted this house to me. Your name's nowhere on it. It's mine, always has been." The shock on his face was almost comical. The mistress, too, looked as if I'd slapped her with the truth. "But, the house? No buts. It's mine. And him." I gestured towards Daniel with a disdainful flick of my wrist. Thinking he could lay claim to it is laughable. She tried a different tactic then, her pride bruised, but not beaten. "Well, you may have the house, but I have him. A rich man with a hefty salary." I burst out laughing. The absurdity of the situation demanded it. "Rich? Hefty salary? He's been playing you. He's a clerk, always has been. There's no wealth there." She turned to Daniel, her face a mask of disbelief and anger. "Is this true?" Daniel, the color draining from his face, nodded, his earlier bravado evaporating into thin air. I might have exaggerated a bit about my job." "A bit?" The fury in her voice was a clear warning signal. She turned her wrath towards me, as if I were the one who'd lied to her. Without another word, she stormed off, Daniel trailing behind her like a lost puppy, his shoulders slumped in defeat. 2 weeks after I kicked Daniel out and stood my ground against his mistress's absurd claim to my house, I took the next logical step. I filed for divorce. It was time to officially sever the ties that bound me to a man who'd become a stranger, a source of betrayal and pain. I wanted freedom, a clean slate for me and my son. Just when I thought I could catch a breath, she was back on my doorstep, the mistress, her desperation palpable, 3 kids in tow looking every bit as miserable as she was. "Please," she started, her eyes brimming with tears. "You have to help us. We have nowhere to go. This house, it's all they have." I stared at her, incredulous. Was she serious? After everything, she had the gall to show up here, demanding my home? The audacity, I muttered under my breath. "Listen, and listen good. This house is mine. You and Daniel made your bed. Now, lie in it. Somewhere else. Her tears quickly evaporated, replaced by a scorching anger. How can you be so heartless? Look at them. She pushed the kids forward, their tears starting on cue. I sighed, my heart heavy for the kids, but my resolve steel. This isn't my doing. It's yours. It's his. You need to leave. Now. When she didn't budge, just stood there screaming accusations and curses, I had no choice. I called the police. The situation was beyond ridiculous, beyond sad. It was a circus, and I was done being a spectator. The officers arrived swiftly, their presence a relief. They tried to reason with her, but she was beyond reason, her tirade against me escalating. Eventually, they escorted her and the children away. The sight of them being led from my doorstep was both a relief and a pang in my heart. Those kids deserved better. Just when I thought I had started to turn the page, Daniel showed up again, knocking on my door with a look that was half regret, half desperation. I opened the door, not surprised but disappointed to see him standing there, a bag in his hand, his eyes pleading. Ella, I messed up. I know that. But I've left her, left all that behind. I want to come back, for you, for our son. Can you forgive me? His voice was shaky, his usual confidence nowhere to be seen. I stared at him, disbelief and anger swirling inside me. After everything, he thought he could just waltz back in? Forgive you? My voice was low, laced with venom. After you lied, cheated, and broke our family? You think you can just drop them and everything's fine? He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes not meeting mine. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to make things right. Make things right? I laughed, harsh and cold. You're beyond making things right, Daniel. You made your choice. Now, live with it. His face fell, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Ella, please. No. It's too late for pleases and sorries. You need to leave. Now. My voice was firm, brooking no argument. He looked at me, the realization finally dawning on him that there was no going back, no forgiveness to be had. With a heavy sigh, he turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. As he disappeared from view, a part of me felt lighter. It was finally over. I was free from the web of lies and betrayal Daniel had spun around us. In the weeks that followed, I heard through the grapevine that Daniel and his mistress were crammed into a small apartment, their lives a constant battle, a far cry from the illusions he'd tried to sell to both of us. It was a fitting end, I thought, to a tale of deceit. As for me, I focused on my son, on rebuilding our lives without the shadow of Daniel hanging over us. We were moving on, stepping into a future that was uncertain, but ours to shape. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. We had survived the storm, and now, it was time to enjoy the calm.